On AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next, your official Chicagoland weather forecast. In our AM 560 Weather Center, breezy with clouds, giving way to some sun by the afternoon, a high of 70. Currently 62. Next news at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
All right, listen up. Judson University's World Leaders Forum is returning, headlined this year by foreign policy expert and retired General David Petraeus, who served as a commander of the U.S. forces in Iraq and Afghanistan and later as the director of the CIA. General Petraeus will be with AM 560's Mark Vargas, host of Mark My Words, heard Sundays here at 7 p.m. Tickets start at $50 for veterans, $75 for general admission, and are available with all the details at judsonu.edu/WLF. For a limited time, you have the opportunity to win a pair of tickets from AM 560 to join General David Petraeus and Mark Vargas. Enter to win today at 560theanswer.com and search for the keyword leaders.
Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield, they are, Amy?
Ben and Jerry's?
Ben and Jerry's, that's
yes,
who they are.
They live in Vermont. I went to their, if an ice cream doesn't work out, they have a ice cream cemetery there. It's fascinating. Really fun thing to do if you ever go to Vermont.
Yeah, I think the $300 million they made selling the company Unilever probably ensures things are going to work out for them. But Ben and Jerry recently did an interview. I saw on this Twitter feed I started following, The First on TV, which is pretty good, sort of like trying to elevate new voices and including new reporters to new interviews, which is nice because the stuff on cable news networks is pretty tiresome. So this young reporter pressed Ben Cohen on their boycotting of Israel over policy disagreements. No Ben and Jerry's for you in Israel. Well, okay. So why boycott Israel, and why not boycott some of the states here in America where you have similar policy disagreements? And she completely befuddles Ben Cohen. It is delicious, if you will, to watch.
If you disagree with the Israeli government policy, why not just stop sales completely?
Well, I disagree with the U.S. policy. We couldn't stop selling in the U.S. I think it's fine to be involved with a country, to be a citizen of a country, and to protest some of the country's actions. And that's essentially what we're doing in terms of Israel. We hugely support Israel's right to exist, but we are against a particular policy.
You guys are big proponents of voting rights. Why do you still sell ice cream in Georgia? Texas, abortion bans. Why are you still selling there?
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't know what that would accomplish. We're working on those issues of voting rights and. I don't know. I think you ask a really good question, and I think
I don't know.
I'd have to sit down and think about it for a bit.
Here, let me help you, Ben. Yeah. Unilever makes us. That would be too much of a price to pay. You see, young lady, we're only interested in doing things like supporting the BDS movement against Israel because it's popular in the circles that we want to be popular in, and because it doesn't impose much of a cost on us. We only want to take this principled stand business so far, you understand? And hypocrisy is part of the attributes that we enjoy as leftist intelligentsia. You see. That's great. A question he never contemplated. They're so blind to their own hypocrisy, they wouldn't even contemplate having to answer a question somebody might pose about it. And so you're made to look like a complete buffoon, which Ben Cohen is intellectually, by this junior reporter from the First on TV. Wonderful. Wonderful job, young lady. Jason Hill joins us now. He's a professor of philosophy at DePaul University, author of the book We Have Overcome. Jason, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan, for having me.
You've written a lot about Israel as well, and sort of the intersection of Israel, the American left, our purge culture that's going on at the hands of neo-Jacobins like Ben and Jerry. Your reaction?
Well, I mean, the way I would put it is that cancel culture is universal, and seemingly disparate movements have one thing in common. What they want to really do is cancel Western civilization, and they want to cancel history. The fact that they're very selective about Israel shows their moral hypocrisy and their sort of inconsistency in the application of their principles. But the principles really, at the end of the day, have one goal, which is to obliterate anything that serves the interest of capitalism, serves the interest of America, and serves the interest of Western civilization. And that is their primary goal. That's why you can see disparate movements like Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQ movement and Students for Justice in Palestine and Antifa and all sorts of movements that would on the surface seem not to have anything in common except one single premise, that is their hatred of Israel, their hatred of America, coming together in their joint venture to cancel this country and to cancel Western civilization in general.
But not before we get ours, say Ben and Jerry, and so many of the champagne socialists. Not before we get ours. We still get ours, right?
We still get ours, yeah, because of course they want the accoutrements and they want the fringe. I call them the fringe benefits. But I just call that sort of journalistic minutia and really just moral hypocrisy that they really haven't thought out through on the part of their public relations managers, really.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's so telling because, I mean, these are the self-styled individuals that are charting a course for a better tomorrow in America, so they tell us.
Well, we're not, and we see it in the inconsistency of the application of their so-called principles. They're not charting a better course for America. They're paying unconscionable lip service to that viewpoint, but they're all destroyers of this great civilization and destroyers of Western civilization in general.
I wanted to get your reaction to the most recent cancellation on campus, not because it's so unique, but because no less than a contributor to The Atlantic took notice of it and describes it as something qualitatively different than what's been happening, and I'm not sure about that. It's the story of Dorian Abbott, who's a geophysicist at University of Chicago. Mm-hmm. You probably know it. Of course you know it. You're familiar with being accosted on campus. I'm sure you're following this. But he was invited to give a lecture at MIT on his work on climate change. And
right.
And people, some of the best and brightest at MIT found out that he is not on board with DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equity. He advocates instead what he calls merit, fairness, and equality. I'll see your DIE and I'll raise you an MFE, basically, merit, fairness, and equality, through which applicants are treated as individuals evaluated through a rigorous and unbiased process based on their merit and qualifications alone. Radical stuff from Dorian Abbott. But because of the statements he made in furtherance of that belief, there was an uprising on campus. You have to cancel him. You can't allow him to speak. And MIT ultimately acquiesced. And as often happens, he was allowed to give a talk to a smaller select group of people in a smaller venue that was not so public-facing, so as to generate the heat that the students were prepared to generate if the commitment to the invitation had been abided. Is this something really that different than what has been happening for literally decades on college campuses? Or is it just those who like to think of themselves as small L liberals when it comes to dialogue and free speech on campus, make selective choices about people being persecuted and say, well, this guy was going to talk about climate change. He's an important person on this issue. He's a geophysicist, University of Chicago. So we need to have his scholarship. And so this is somebody we can't cancel. And they're trying to draw lines after all the lines have been erased.
No, this is something that has gotten increasingly worse. I mean, I have seen just in the past 2 years where it's the primacy of feelings the primacy of feelings and the primacy of emotions as unassailable givens that are unanswerable to reason, evidence, and logical argumentation. And so what has become increasingly more common is for students to register their protest, not through reasoned debate, turning up to a speaker whose views that you differ, whose views differs from yours, and you sort of politely and in a civil manner raise your objections, but through this kind of primitive, savage display of emotions and feelings. It's almost a kind of these students have turned into feral creatures, and that display of ferality and the display of emotions are taken as unassailable givens, and university administrators have increasingly capitulated to those feelings as unassailable givens and use them as the means to adjudicate between or among truth claims. So this is not something that I saw even on my campus when 10 years ago, 8 years ago. I think this is a phenomenon that has gotten increasingly worse as cancel culture, as the relativism, as as activism has started to replace scholarship. In my own university, I see where the honors program, for example, has imported a kind of activism into the curricula, like take a stand, on Black Lives Matter or the hashtag #MeToo movement, whereas the honors program used to be a bastion. It used to be like a secular church of old-fashioned scholarship, and you find it's happening increasingly on most universities where activism becomes a component of scholarship, and a big component of scholarship. That just gives the students license to sort of disrupt speeches or talks that they disagree with. But to answer your question, this has become increasingly worse. And, my forthcoming book that's coming out, What Do White Americans Owe Black People, I spent a lot of time, as you know, talking about the roots and the origins of this phenomenon. The chickens have come home to roost. It started back in the 1960s with the rise of these fake disciplines like Black studies and queer studies and post-colonial studies and Chicana studies and all kind of women's studies and gender studies, fake disciplines that were nothing but activist studies and revolutionary studies that attacked Western civilization, reason, and logic. And now the chickens have come home to roost, and we're seeing the manifestations of its ugliness.
This is sort of the solidarity and marginality movement, as Rusty Reno describes it. You segregate for the purpose of unifying, and it seems to be a contradiction in terms, but they do have a commonality, and that commonality is basically Marxism.
That's right, Dan. And it's not only Marxism. I was just reading Leon Trotsky's The Permanent Revolution, which I keep on my desk, because it's Marxism, and it's a permanent revolution that can never end, no matter how many of the demands are met. I mean, in my book that's coming out on What Do White Americans Owe Black People, I talk about post-oppression. We are living in a post-oppressed society. Blacks are not oppressed in the way that they were prior to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And gays and lesbians since the 2015 Marital Act are certainly not oppressed in the way that they were or had their individual rights denied. But the revolution has to be a permanent one until all persons are eviscerated of their agency, until their confidence and their means of issuing a no, issuing objections are completely erased. And, then you have the means of implementing what I call a new eugenics program, which is what cancel culture and woke culture are all about. It's a massive eugenics program to re-socialize the sensibilities of young people to usher in a Marxist socialist money law. Let me just say, what is really socialism? It's a money laundering, Ponzi scheming, legalized theft program by the government. I think the left, the conservatives, should really start calling socialism what it really is. It's a money laundering program that appropriates money without people's permission from them.
That's a great description.
So this is, it's a Ponzi scheming money laundering program, and that's what they're after.
Just since you have suffered so many slings and arrows during your time at DePaul University, update us from the last time we spoke. What is campus life like for you at that anti-Catholic Catholic school?
Well, fortunately, I don't have to be there. I'm still teaching online. I have been teaching online since the pandemic started in March of 2020, and I taught online in the spring. I'm on sabbatical right now, writing another book and writing a lot of articles, and then I'll be teaching online in the winter. So I'll probably go back in person on spring, but I'm still persona non grata. There are about 2 people on campus who will speak to me, and there's still a boycott against me. I mean, I teach 4 classes. I teach 4 classes, and there are only 2 students in each of the class. May I just say that those 4 classes would normally have attracted 40 students in each class, and I would have had 2 teaching assistants for each of those classes. I have 4 students among 2 classes.
Amy, Amy, cross DePaul off the list for Peyton and Eli, please.
Done.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. Well, who's telling the students not to sign up for classes?
Well, it's a boycott led by the students and the faculty together.
Okay.
When I was censured a long time ago, 2 years ago.
Right, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah.
Jason Hill, he is a philosophy professor at DePaul. If you haven't picked up his book, We Have Overcome, An Immigrant's Love Letter to America, do that. And his forthcoming book, What White Americans Owe Black Americans, as you were just describing, there's an excellent blurb, I know, on the jacket of that book that you want to make sure to read too, Amy, when you pick that up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a blurb from me. Blurb from me.
Oh.
Yeah, excellent blurb from the great Dan Proud.
I don't have the chops to write a book, but I can write a pretty good blurb, and that's the extent of my ability. Jason Hill, thanks so much for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
The Social Security Administration's computer servers are 45 years old. Computer servers at Health and Human Services are 50. Maybe that's how cyber criminals hacked U.S. Census Bureau's computers